Hello again, I'm Tripp Rogers, and this is Tripp's Take. Of course, I'm going to weigh in like everyone else on the college football playoffs. Actually, it's funny because there were two things last weekend that kind of paralleled each other. First of all, the final SEC on CBS presentation, because the contract will now go to ABC and ESPN. Now, this was a series that was started by CBS back in the 1990s. And the SEC at the time was a regional football conference. And this made it a national conference. And it has been the biggest college football telecast every Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock. And, of course, we were entertained by Uncle Vern Lundquist. And, of course, now you had Brad Nessler and Gary Danielson. Gary Danielson had been there for quite a while, too. But CBS decided a couple of years ago they were not going to renew because, well, they had signed an extension back in 2008 for only $55 million a year. Now, they wanted something astronomical to continue. And CBS said, no, we're going to spend our money elsewhere. And they're going to do the Big Ten next year at 3:30 in the afternoon instead of the SEC. The SEC moves over to ABC. And again, the reason is money. We then move to the following day. Florida State left out of the college football playoffs. The four schools that got in included an SEC team, Alabama, which had one loss, but Florida State was unbeaten. And the question goes, well, why would you not have Florida State? Well, first off, their quarterback had gone down with an injury. And the other part of it is it's all about the money. Now, next year, they'll be going to a 12-team playoff in college football. And so Florida State would have been in, but it doesn't matter whether it's 4, 12, 68, you're still going to have somebody left out. And when somebody gets left out, they're not happy. Now, I understand what people are saying about Florida State. You go undefeated, you deserve a prize. I agree. I'm not going to argue that point. But it's all about money. It's all about ratings. And after TCU got absolutely obliterated in the college football playoffs last year, they don't want to take a chance on a ratings downer. The other side of it is that realistically, Florida State would have ended up playing Michigan, and that game could have been really ugly. So as it is now, Alabama plays Michigan, which is probably going to be a pretty interesting game in the Rose Bowl, and then the other two teams in it, Washington and Texas, will square off. Keep in mind, Texas had beaten Alabama earlier this year, and I think a Texas-Alabama game in the national championship would be interesting. I'm not sold on Michigan being the top team, but going back to my original point, it's all about money, folks. It really is. And it's about ratings. And ESPN wants the best ratings they can get for this. So therefore, I mean, if you're going to end up taking, the other part of this is, if you do not take an Alabama, you're not taking an SEC team. Actually, there were two precedents that were made. I forgot about this. Number one, the first unbeaten team that did not make the college football playoffs. And number two, the first time the team that was ranked number one in the next to last rankings did not make the playoff because Georgia ended up 6th. Now, are these the top 4 schools in the nation? No, you got to put Georgia in there because they are the two-time defending national championship. They played really well. But as a result, now they're going to get the consolation of the Orange Bowl. And although I really don't think a lot of the Georgia players who are going to go into the draft are going to play in that game, Florida State, listen, you're upset, you're mad. Why don't you go out and prove yourself? I mean, if they go and beat Georgia in the Orange Bowl, even though, again, I say a lot of Georgia players may decide not to play, it still will make a statement. Although I read something online, and it's not a bad idea, but Florida State could go and appear and practice, and then right at game time say, guess what? We're not playing. Walk off, forfeit the game, and leave, a lot of embarrassed people, although I have a funny feeling that would not be the right course of action. I mean, it's a good idea. It's funny, but what are you going to do, right? So, and again, people are talking about it. It's controversy, yak, 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 and it gives you something to talk about. And again, it'll be interesting to see how this whole thing does play out. Speaking of playing out, I think I had mentioned it. I may not have, but there's a change in the offing in my employment status. The owner of the radio station that I work for, Q105.3 in Savannah, Georgia, is owned by a guy named Jerry Rogers, who'd been in Savannah radio for over 50 years. And it was my extreme luck to fall into a job there a couple years ago. I never thought I'd be back in commercial radio. But Jerry announced in October his plans to sell the radio station to a local businessman, O.C. Welsh. I'm very familiar with him because I drive an O.C. Welsh Ford, and Sandy bought one from him a couple years ago. I've known O.C. for many, many years. Having said that, though, the change has come, so now I am officially the afternoon drive guy at Q105.3 in Savannah, Georgia, WRHQ.com. It's a change. It's going to be interesting, and I kind of made the post on Facebook, our Elvis has left the building, and it's a good point. And that was the place that was built by Jerry Rogers. I got some pretty big shoes to fill, but it will be interesting. That is Tripp's Take for December the 7th, 2023. I'd love to hear your comments and questions. Please feel free to email me, trippstake@gmail.com. Fantasy football players, the Hall of Famer Mike Scheck and I will update the fantasy for Week 14. It's the Fantasy Sultans. You can find it on Spotify for podcasters and on YouTube. Just search for the Fantasy Sultans. Like the music of the 60s, 70s, and 80s? Hey, make sure you catch WTRSradio.com online. Join me again next week. For now, Tripp Rogers. Thanks for watching. Make it a great day.